This is a big public health crisis. It's been going on for decades and arguably is getting worse every year. I did get some numbers about London. So this is 10-year stats, not 1-year stats. 1,545 crashes involving people walking over the past 10 years. 933 crashes involving people biking over 10 years as well. Now, apparently the numbers are slowly going down, but still, that's a shitload of people. Pardon my language. So as I said, this is a public health crisis. I think it's, I mean, we should all be concerned, obviously, regardless of how we get around. If you walk, you bike, you drive, or all of the above. I mean, more people are being killed in car crashes than cardiac episodes, plane crashes, et cetera, probably cancer. It's a huge problem, but because it's a slow drip, and we've kind of gotten used to hearing about it, literally every single day, I watch the news, you pick up the paper, you look at the online news, every single day in London, there is a car crash or 3, including yesterday, today, the day before that. So that's the context of this joyful experience we're gonna have. So obviously the movie covers a lot. There's a lot to unpack. We have limited time. I'm curious, for the 3 of you, were there things in the movie that surprised you? And if so, like what sorts of things surprised you? Jump in any order.
I didn't realize Copenhagen was much later in their transition. So that was new to me.
Yeah, it kind of has this myth of like the 40s and 50s, but...
Or the 70s too, when a lot of that was happening in the Netherlands. I didn't realize that. That was new.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been said that, you know, when there's a push for cities, in especially North America, to adopt better active transportation policies, people will push back on it, saying, oh, we're not Amsterdam, we're not Copenhagen or other European cities. But people always come back with, you know, Amsterdam wasn't always Amsterdam, and it's still eye-opening to see in the film, like, how car-brained, for lack of a better word, Amsterdam and Copenhagen, all these other cities, they weren't immune to, you know, the whole urban renewal stuff of the 1950s. It just so happened to be in Europe as well. Like, Europe wasn't immune to it. As much as a lot of urbanists do fetishize, you know, Europe, like, they had to do the work as much as we don't want to admit that to ourselves.
For me, it was the $1 million value on a human life. And that was a
eye-opening.
A $4 million correction, but a $280 million loss of lives. That's a staggering number, and how simple the correction was. Maybe not in time and implementing, but the answers were there. They just had to be listened to.
And sort of the importance we put on a human life. Like, if we have to put a number on it, then, you know, are people's lives who walk and bike less valuable than people who drive? Like, I mean, you can get into a lot of granular detail, but yeah, it is sort of a bit of a slap in the reality. There's so many things. I mean, I could sit here talking about this all night, but we're not going to do that. Tom, I wanted to, because of your work in sort of what you do, I'm going to call it marketing and creative sort of stuff. And interestingly, perhaps coincidentally or not, all 4 of us are wordsmiths in various ways. Either writers, communications people. I worked in communications. I had a blog. You've got a newsletter. You're a journalist. Like, we're all interested in words and language. And I think you know where I'm going with this. So, Tom, I'm interested in your perspective on how we use the language around not just car crashes, but auto. I mean, we just use the term car brain, which is sort of a common term that has several interpretations, but things we talked about, jaywalking, like accidents versus crashes, things that you see in the media a lot. You hear a lot about what people were wearing or not wearing. Is that responsible for why they get hit? So I'm curious to hear from your creative perspective, sort of those.
Yeah, I think it's a continual battle to reframe this kind of mainstream narrative that's been out for so long with so many dollars behind it. And exactly to your point, I think we need to start framing these not as accidents, which many people have been doing, But we have to look at these as results. I mean, we build vehicles that weigh, 6,000, 7,000 pounds. They can go 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds. And then we market them extremely recklessly. And then we're all surprised, that there's going to be road violence. We have to fight at City Hall to get some simple changes. And so the equation is very simple. These aren't accidents, these are results that are happening on our streets. And that's something that I think really needs to be pushed into the mainstream consciousness and have people really remember that. It's a matter of all the choices that we all make that kind of ladder up to these numbers. And, we can use deaths and injuries as one metric, but we can also, hopefully we can get to a place where, our metrics are looking at, youth mobility and joy and enjoying their spaces and enjoying independence, not just, unfortunately, a death metric as a key metric.
A death metric.
But I think it's all about kind of reframing the discussion that has been just, perpetuated over and over and over with, a billion-dollar industry. And sorry that I was involved with it for a while. I'm trying to make up for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing that we forget, or we've been sort of like mythologized into thinking, like everybody says, oh, most people drive. But when you start wondering, like, why do most people drive? Well, we live in literally saturated in heavy auto industry marketing, 24/7, every platform you can think of, newspapers, social media, online, radio, television. There's marketing, there's lobbying, there's product placement, sponsorships. It's intense, continuous. They spend literally billions of dollars every year on ensuring that we continue to think that this is freedom, this is our choice, but we're not. I mean, it's a choice that's been made for us to.
Important to remember in the discussion too, especially when we're trying to make change, that, it's not always a great idea to be pointing fingers. I know that people that are driving their kids to school, it might not, it's more about holding I think the local council accountable to that parent feeling that they have no choice but to drive, because some of the situations are so dangerous for these kids walking and biking. So sometimes we have to kind of redirect our focus and attention, I think, from the individual driver to the system that the council has built and sustains, and that so many people here probably advocate to change.
Sheryl, you and I are big bus fans. I have a bus pass. I love taking the bus. And I wanted to, I guess, hear from you about ways that you think we can normalize taking the bus, walking, biking. Like right now, they're still considered sort of fringe. You hear about it being referred to as alternative transportation. Like you and I both use all those modes regularly, day in, in different ways and different occasions. Like, what are your sort of ideas on how we can normalize those modes of transportation for transportation, not just as a sport or recreation, not just for children or people who are too poor to afford a car?
My first comment would be stop making transit a social service. It is not a social service. It is a city service. It is there to move people from one place to the next as efficiently as possible. That's it. I've heard it called the welfare wagon, the poverty train, like so many different things. And it's an inexcusable way to look at movement, right? And I've had business owners, and Kathy and I were just chatting about this, a very prominent business owner in London when rapid transit was first being talked about. And she said that they couldn't remove parking from the front of her store because her customers will not come and they will not take the bus with those kinds of people. And I'm standing beside this woman, and I'm in college. I work full time. I have a family. I have a column that I've written for years. Am I one of those kind of people? Because I take the bus every day. That's my major mode of transportation. So what exactly are those kind of people? And I knew what she was talking about, right? I think it was very clear, but it really changed my perspective of this person. I've never been to her business again. I've never referred a person to her business again, because I'm one of those kind of people too. So that in itself, stop making transit a social service. And And for me, I'm a relatively new cyclist. I rode my bike when I was a kid, much different city back in the 60s and 70s. Yes, I'm that old. But now I just started biking about 5 years ago, and very slowly, very cautiously. And now it's not unusual for me to get a week's groceries on my bicycle. And there's a really good reason for that. New infrastructure, safer infrastructure, the progression of the cycling lanes that are coming, and what's the word I'm looking for? The hope for the newer bike lanes coming in with more protective barriers. But the biggest thing for me is having role models in this city who were cyclists. Who's here? I can look out here. Colleen. She's my bike twin. We're Breezer sisters. Gary Brown, Paul Seal, Lori Bursch is here somewhere. I know I saw her smiling face there. Ben Durham, all of you people, you're silent but encouraging ways of never wavering from your bikes. You're always on your bikes. And I got kind of jealous, actually. That's why I got on my bike to begin with. And Andrew Honeyford is the biggest pain in my ass when it comes to transit. But I will tell you, we were in the middle of a cemetery, and he was showing me how to ride my bike better so that I wasn't killing myself, using it the wrong way. So keep being those advocates. You don't have to be the person in the front of the camera, with your hand in the air. It's those silent reminders that, yes, you can do it. You can be on the road. You can be safe, but you have to be careful. But you can do all the things. And I've seen so much more of the city than I ever have. And I've lived here 56 years. And I'm discovering all these little cool pockets. And I'm spending more money because now I'm going back to all these little cool pockets. I never went to Wortley Village once in my life. Now I go there all the time. Right? And I'm an East End kid. And I still live Northeast East End. I'm an OEV because that beautiful bike lane is up and down is so fantastic. So these are the things that keep me motivated. These are the things that you do as alternate transit users, active transportation activists, whatever you want to call yourself, you are the reason why other people will grab a new bicycle or walk in their neighborhood or hop on the bus and just explore. So don't stop doing what you're doing.
Yay! Give yourselves a hand. Give yourselves a hand. Thank you. That was actually very emotional. It is an emotional. Okay. One thing I did hear, it was an interesting tip, and I'd never thought about it, was if you wear a bike helmet, if you use a bike helmet, wear it when you go into a store. And I thought, oh, yes, make yourself visible as a person who rides your bike. And just literally making yourself visible and then asking, where can I park my bike securely? You don't seem to have any bike parking. I have done that a number of times, and it's actually turned into a bike rack a couple of times. So, small wins, I guess. Thank you, Sheryl. It's Cedric. You described yourself as an ordinary man who owns an e-bike. And it's a very nice e-bike. So we've been hearing a lot more about e-bikes in the last several years. It's kind of exploded in growth and popularity and interest. I'm curious to hear how having an e-bike has changed the way you get around and what you think the potential is to encourage more people who don't even bike at all to buy an e-bike or use an e-bike to take trips that they might normally take in a car.
Absolutely. Thank you I'm so glad you asked me that. The e-bike I have, it's been like a beacon of freedom to me. This is not like hyperbole or whatever.
Bring it on.
As a longtime cyclist, and as someone who lives in one of the hilliest parts of the city, your knees can only take so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, my knees are like going the Bobby Orr route or whatever. Anyways, with e-bikes, the biggest advantage of them for me is I can climb up hills. Like there's a hill near my house. I would always have to dismount and walk. I didn't have to do that with the e-bike. I could just keep pedaling. I could keep the momentum going. and the speed as well. Like, I'm not normally the fastest cyclist. I can go faster than I ever have before. With e-bikes, I got my e-bike in October of last year. It effectively replaced the car that I was driving. I've saved, like, since we're allowed to say the S word, I can say the S word. I said
Allowed you, but
I've saved a shit ton on gas. Like, tune-ups, repairs are small potatoes compared to repairing cars, you know. Even like speed, you know, like I can, while, you know, cars are stuck in traffic, I can just zoom in on the bike lane, whether that's a protected bike lane or a painted bike lane. Even though paint is an infrastructure, it has its advantages. And even in the winter, people ask, oh, what do you do in the winter? I still ride in the winter. And the thing is, like, I've racked up so far through about 7 months now I've had it, 3,100 kilometers. I regret nothing. Like, I have saved, like, my bank account is, I'm not afraid to look at my bank account now. Like, my money is, like, it's not, my wallet's, you know, it's, I'm not burning a hole in my wallet or whatever when I have to get a tune-up. So there's so many hidden advantages. And for me, it's about economic justice. Like, yeah, so there's lots of advantages. I said I regret nothing.
I like that. Should be on a t-shirt, maybe it is. I definitely see a lot more older people, you know, looking at e-bikes as a good option because of mobility issues, you know, just energy, whatever, depending on where you live and the terrain. I too live in one of the hilliest parts of the city, and I was like, what was I thinking? But it is interesting to see how a lot of older people are really getting excited about e-bikes and not necessarily getting rid of their cars, but using an e-bike for trips that they might normally have taken on a car. So I think it is a game changer for a lot of people, which, fingers crossed, is a good thing. So I'm curious from any of you, all of you, whatever, if you have any thoughts on tactical urbanism and other quote-unquote unofficial grassroots initiatives to make streets safer, either on very small, sort of like just a neighborhood corner, or, you know, things like kind of what they did, you know, closing off a street and turning into a party zone. Like, I know it's a bit controversial. I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts are on benefits and pros and cons.
I haven't done too much tactical urbanism, but we did close, when my kids were a little bit younger, we would close our street down somewhat frequently. And we literally just put the pylons at the end of the street, which I'm sure many people do here. But what's interesting is that we had a street, and this is in Hamilton, that the kids had to cross every day to go to school, and it was just a disaster. Cars were flipped over almost bi-weekly, and nothing really was getting done. And we were screaming and shouting and trying our best to make some change. And the first time we put up these pylons on the street for the kids to literally just bike around and play soccer, there was a cop on the street within about like 10 minutes. You know, I'll just never forget the weight, and it just, again, highlights that kind of imbalance of where our priorities are. Not answering your question, pylons, 6 pylons blocked off our street, and it was great.
Love it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen sort of quirky examples, everything from, well, the toilet plunger is kind of a classic, you know, it's literally a row of new, presumably, toilet plungers acting as kind of flex posts and creating a bike lane. But I mean, I've seen everything from like hay bales to, you know, painted sections on streets. I haven't seen a ton of it in London, but maybe it's so covert. That
we do put pylons out at the end of our street where there's a pretty scary turn that cars can really whip around. So we do that. We still do that to this day when the kids are out in the summertime. Just put one pylon and just shrinks it down a bit, and they've got to actually stop and make a proper turn.
Make it a tighter corner, curb bump out.
Yeah.
Nice.
There you go.
I was in Halifax a couple weeks ago for a transit conference, and I noticed two different options at two different crosswalks. One was they had attached to the light standard a big basket full of foam bricks. I couldn't believe it.
I'm so excited that someone's seen this in the real world, because we've all seen the meme or whatever online.
It was there, and there was a basket on either side, so you grabbed a brick, you walked across the street, and you put it back in the basket when you got to the other side. But they also had red flags, where you could grab a red flag and walk across the street and do that too. I think it was maybe more for small children, but it was a great idea. But for me, right now at my street, I live near Highbury and Oxford, which is just a complete disaster with construction right now. But they've put in all of the traffic calming in my neighborhood, which we never had, and we have this really nice curvy road that people love to race down. So now we've got like bollards with the bump in the middle. You've never seen cars slow down so fast because they're so afraid of scratching their car going through those two bollards. Keep them. I will pay for them to be permanently installed on my street and my whole neighborhood, because we have so much traffic now that this is a great investment in our neighborhood for sure.
Tactical urbanism, I haven't seen much in London, but in this documentary, it gave me a bit of inspiration. I live near a 2-lane road that the speed limit's 40, but people keep going like almost double that. Like there's people even like at ungodly hours of the night are just ripping down the hill, and like I've always thought, what can I do as like one person to do something about this? And yes, there's people's lives at stake. So I think about, what one person can do, but also like how I could interact with, I don't know, the municipality to make it a permanent fix. Like temporary is nice, but
Doug is here. Chat him up. Well, it is interesting. There is a book called Tactical Urbanism, and I don't know if the Little Bicycle Library has it. It's a fascinating book, even if you don't end up actually using it. Just sign it out. But I think the public library also has copies. It's really cool to just sort of flip through and go, yeah, this could be really fun. So you didn't hear it here, even though I'm totally recording and everyone knows I'm saying it. I'm just saying, it's interesting as a resource, as an inspirational thought. Real bricks or foam bricks? Whatever. You heard it there. Something else that gets a lot of heated discussion is automated speed and red light cameras. I know it's certainly a hot topic here in London, presumably in Toronto and other cities. Some people call it a tax grab, others say it's not. The evidence seems to indicate that they do help to reduce infractions and speeding. There aren't a lot of them around, and there's kind of inconsistent coverage. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on those things, and also other traffic rules and laws, sort of in general, things that you think, yeah, that needs to be changed or updated. Like my particular thing is driver's licenses. Like our driver's ed system is a joke, really, especially compared to a lot of other countries. The other thing is you get your license and that's it. You're good till 80. Like, in what other vehicular transportation system would you literally be given a license at arguably, 16, 18, 20, and then not have to come back until you're 80? It's insane. I say every 5 years you get a written and a road retest. Do it. I would do it. We all need it. We all develop lazy habits. It's just human nature. Anyways, that's my little spiel. Do you guys have any thoughts on automated speed cameras or other traffic legality issues?
I think it speaks volumes that it's actually a topic that's being debated, because it's quite literally just capturing people speeding or going through red lights. So
Don't speed, you won't get a ticket.
It really highlights again just what is so ingrained in our culture that people feel like they're being robbed because they're going over the speed limit that we've all set. Like, it's so confusing.
My freedom.
It just, yeah, I know, and I think it just speaks volumes about that. That's my only thought on it.
I saw you chuckle, Cheryl.
I was robbed. For me, it's just the lack of consequences, right? I know we've given the police a huge budget and they've made all of these promises and expectations, but I rarely see a car pulled over for a traffic infraction because they're just so overwhelmed with all the other problems in the city. So I really don't think a red light camera is a bad option. It's not the only option, but I don't think it's a bad one.
Part of a toolkit.
When it comes to red light cameras and speeding cameras, they're good ideas in of themselves. You know, but again, yeah, there's no consequence to running a red light when there's a red light camera. There's no consequence to speeding. It's just a fine and that's it, as opposed to, let's say being pulled over, then it goes on your license or whatever. It's not the solution compared to like, why, for example, are people speeding on a certain road that has a speed camera? Why are people running that particular red light? For example, Wellington commissioners, you know, in school zones, why are people speeding? It's looking at the road design. It should be something that should never be ruled out.
So let's talk about size. Yes, it does matter. They touched on it briefly in the film. The vehicles that are more and more common on our city streets are taller, they have very flat front ends, they're heavier, they're larger, and as a consequence, cause a lot more damage when they hit soft, squishy human beings, or buildings in London's case is a popular option. So, I mean, the evidence seems to indicate that they are indeed more dangerous for everyone, including people in other similar sized vehicles. But there's so much focus, and I know, Tom, like the image that I put in the slide deck before we shot the movie, before we showed the movie, you know, the vehicles, these huge SUVs and pickup trucks that have become very commonplace as day-to-day vehicles, like they've become the family car, even though they're huge, heavy, very costly vehicles. I can't imagine what the gas bills are like, but people seem to be fine with that. So, like, how do we try and put that genie, that oversized, dangerous genie, back in the bottle? How do we manage these ever increasingly large and dangerous vehicles that are becoming more and more commonplace on our streets? Like, do you have any thoughts? Idealistically or not, or realistically? We're all at a loss.
Stop making your city so comfortable for large vehicles. Make smaller roads. The Wave L bike lane is the perfect example of creating a space where you absolutely have to slow down and do the speed limit if you want to make that corner without scraping up your car. You can absolutely make that corner, but you have to slow down and you have to pay attention. That's it. That's all you have to do. So like they showed in the movie, put in the ballers, put in the bike parking, put in all of the different things, make your lanes just enough to get through. People aren't going to risk scraping up their vehicle. They don't care. It's not the accidents that they're concerned about. It's the minor damages that are going to cost them money.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Like, we've all seen it, right? Like, people will slow down because they're afraid of scratching the cars, but they won't slow down because they think, well, a person will just jump out of the way, and if they don't, well, they should have, so it's their fault, really, for being in the way.
Yeah, Wave L, like exactly what Cheryl said about the Wave L bike lane. Like, I use it a lot now to get through throughout the East End, and I remember when it was going in, and there were a lot of cranks or whomever that were like emailing city staff to take it out or whatever, and I was just thinking, come on, man, like, really? And they're complaining about they can't make the corner, and I decided when I still had the Dodge, I decided to take it out. I was like, so I drove down Wayville and I turned and I was like, that wasn't bad. Like, what are these people crying about? And I know what they're crying about when, about this bike lane. This isn't really about their car, the minor damage that they may think that they're going to incur. It's that the fact that cyclists may have their own space now, that they are slowly, with every construction season that happens, they're slowly getting integrated into the city, that there's slowly a sense of belonging for them, people like me. So like, it's way bigger than, you know, Chad or Brad and his F-150 getting a scratch or whatever. So it's bigger than that. It's a class thing. It's economic justice to me. I ranted a bit.
Good point, it is. Yeah, economic justice, that's a whole nother, we could go on for a long time about that. I mean, how it sort of dovetails into suburban development, car dependency, housing, et cetera, et cetera. And again, they touched on a bit of that in the film. Just sort of as a final question before we sort of jump into the fray with our friends here, what suggestions, practical or idealistic or otherwise, what suggestions do you have for people to help make streets safer, make active transportation more integrated, and just to improve the safety and the quality of our streets? Like just anything that you sort of have experienced or done or seen, and what would you suggest to us and yourselves?
One of the things that I've done is walk, you know, bike, and not just in like a general platitude thing, like literally immerse yourself in a walk and see, like, look at your surroundings. You're not going to find any ideas for safer streets from, you know, an SUV, from like your windshield or like F-150 or whatever. It's best to see it from your own two eyes on the ground at the same height as your fellow humans. So yeah, that's what I do. Like I walk a lot, I bike a lot, and I try to see like how we can create a better tomorrow with our infrastructure.
Good idea. Walk, walk, walk.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I come at this from more of a, I guess, a communications angle, and for me, I'm trying to, and the work I do is trying to just normalize, you know, walking, cycling, rolling as not some radical or fringe type of activity. And I think trying any chance you get to be able to kind of highlight that imbalance in a somewhat of an emotional and simple way to people can really strike a chord with them. For me, I had zero background in transportation, planning, city affairs, anything, until I got my kids on their bike, and that really changed everything for me, having that kind of moment of clarity. And then, you know, it all went to hell. But I think that moment of once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I think trying your best to do that with people and giving them their moment of clarity is important. And that's kind of what I try to do in the work that I'm doing.
And consistency is important, right? And if you enjoy riding your bike or walking or taking transit, that's great. Tell everybody about it. I also think getting businesses involved. If businesses know that you are not driving to their business, right, that's a little light bulb for them. Because we see the pressure that city council gets and city staff get. Oh, we need free parking, we need free parking. I don't drive, but I'm still spending a lot of money, and I spend more money because
You have more money to spend.
I don't have a car payment, I don't have gas and all that kind of stuff. So I think getting businesses involved and understanding who is actually coming to their door to spend money has a lot more power with their BIAs in the city than just, you know, your single voice. But I'd also encourage people to talk to your city councilors, talk to your city staff, right? I know Mr. McRae is a long distance cyclist, right? He's a very avid cyclist. He understands bike lanes and the city structure, but he's also got limitations and decisions that are made that he has no control over, right? So I think understanding the processes and understanding where the money comes from for these things, and just that consistent communication between yourself, your community, your council, your city staff is really, really important. It can't be an us versus them situation, because then nothing ever gets done. You have to work together. But that consistency, being out there on the road, being out there on the sidewalks, being out there on the bus, tell the world that that's what you're doing. And what you're doing on the bus. Like if you're on the bus, you're buying movie tickets, right? You're not driving, you're not worried about traffic, you're not worried about weather, you're just, reading a book, reading a magazine, doing all kinds of things, listening to a podcast. That's me time when I'm on transit. So there's lots of little things that you can do that make a really big impact.
Those are all great ideas. It reminds me of, I don't know if this is still being used, but there was a expression that was used in sort of literacy coaching and educational. Sheryl, you may be familiar with it, each one teach one. And it's been around for a long time, and it's very simple, and it's kind of like what you were talking about. Like, if you walk to work, or if you bike to the grocery store, or if you do all of these things, including driving, like whatever your mode of transportation is for a particular task, tell somebody just in casual conversation, plant the idea in their head. Like, talk about how you get around very casually, because a lot of people I know, I have friends, her grandchildren had never been on a city bus. They were 10 and 12 years old. So the day of the the eclipse, thank you. We came downtown on the bus. Like, the eclipse and the bus ride were equally exciting for them. Like, that's how much fun the bus is. And I hear people say, I would never get on the bus, all these, those people, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what they think goes on city buses. Like, I travel on buses everywhere I go, especially when I'm traveling. I have a collection of transit tickets. I am a nerd, and I'm very proud of it. But I'm always curious about other cities' transit systems. And so I'm like, where have these people been taking the bus? Like, London's transit is clean. Given the little amount of money that it has, it's reasonably efficient. It's been underfunded, like most transit systems in North America, for decades, which is why it doesn't run often enough, which is why it is infrequent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So take the bus, take a friend with you on the bus, use your bus pass, I'll cover your tab. What is it? It just normalizes all of these things. And another thing to remind people who complain about bike lanes especially, is that every single person who's walking, every single person who's biking, and every single person on a city bus is one less car in your way. So the more people who are using active and shared transportation is less traffic congestion. Not everyone needs to drive. Some people do need to drive, delivery people, transit, blah, blah, blah. Like, they need to have free flowing traffic ways, but a lot of us can get around at least some of the time not on a car. And so just keep, as you say, keep talking about how you get around and make it normal. And talk to your counselors, because they are the ones, all of you, not just your own counselor, do like I do. I know they love my messages. There's so many opportunities that transportation is involved in. Planning applications, mobility, transportation, street projects, all of these things involve transportation, mobility in some way. And so poke around a little bit online. Sometimes it's a little tedious. Sometimes you go, whoa, I didn't know that. LTC just released a new 5-year plan. I found a few surprises in it that didn't really make sense to me, and I found some good stuff that I liked. So there's lots of opportunities to sort of look at things in your neighborhood or near where you work, your bus route, your driving route, and sort of find those opportunities that engage you and engage your neighbors and your friends. Talk to your counselors, explain to them how important these things are to you, and that, yes, you shop downtown and you don't drive there. By the way, there are 15,000 parking spaces in the downtown core alone. Don't tell me there's not enough parking. All right, enough from us. I'm sure that some of you have some experiences or questions or feedback that you would like to share. I will jump up and be the runner with the microphone, and I'll leave these poor people up here to defend themselves. But we're all just gonna answer and participate as we can. Here's our first question.
Hi, Cedric. Hi. There was a really interesting confluence moment in the film for me in terms of people-centered design. The part where they shut down 34th Avenue and the organizer points to all these chairs and tables and say, you know what, look at all these chairs and tables, they're full. And for me, it really struck something I've been thinking about lately with hostile architecture and how it relates to seating, the way that cities, including ours, take away places to sit or make them uncomfortable, again, to sort of scare off, quote unquote, those people. But it seemed to me that, you know, if we're gonna have person-centered design, that also means person-centered design that's compassionate, that includes sitting. And it was interesting for me to see that connection with person-centered design as it relates to transportation. As you all have been, you know, thinking about person-centered design and transportation, are there any interesting links or ripple effects that you've seen as you've sort of pursued these ideas?
Mm-hmm. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
I ramble. I'm sorry. So as you think about person-centered design as it relates to transportation, do you think are there other ripple effects you see about the ways that we can design more for people rather than property? That, you know, it feels to me like it all just comes together to make our cities a better place. What else do you see person-centered design? Essentially, what else interests you about that?
What interests me, you talked about hostile architecture, and I've seen that, you know, like we have sloped benches or you have concrete pads with like steel spikes or whatever. It basically, what I've thought about for the longest time, it's punishing all of us because of the specter of someone who makes less than us, or you know, like someone might sit there, someone who's unhoused might sit there or whatever, and it just ruins it for this classist architecture, which it is. It ruins the urban experience for all of us. If we're looking for a place to sit, we can only sit on a sloped bench. They have it actually in the rapid transit shelter that just got unveiled, as an example. So I think a lot about how we need to proactively force in compassionate architecture. Like, people deserve to feel comfortable and happy and safe when they're experiencing the street that they're on or the neighborhood that they're in, because we all deserve, I believe we all deserve nice things. That's all I have to say about that.
Nice things.
Beautiful things, pro-abundance.
Hi, I've got a bit of a weird question, because I feel like there's a problem with the infrastructure in the city right now with biking infrastructure. I love it. I love the stuff that's coming up on Waterloo when you're going up there. But there's a big problem with trying to, like, sometimes you're going on Queen on a bike, and all of a sudden your bike lane just disappears. It's just gone, right? And even the bike lane that was there was just a painted line, or the bike lanes don't get cleared, or they're not accessible to people that aren't using, for example, bicycles. If you're on a skateboard and there's debris or there's that textured paint, it's just like, it's not skatable, right? So it's another problem. So as somebody who's been hit 4 times in traffic while biking, while I had the right of way, I started being like, okay, if there's not infrastructure, I'm just going to go on the sidewalk, even though it's illegal for me to be there, right? But that's the choice I'm making for myself. But it made me think about, like, instead of tacking on infrastructure to a car-centric city and trying to like bolt it onto the outside and like, oh, we got a little bike lane here, we got a little bit of paint over there. What if we took the approach of, you guys know that whole analogy of like the jar that you fill with rocks and pebbles and sand, right? And our sand in this case is our bike paths and our walking paths, where we can go anywhere from there. Like, it fills all the gaps, and it saturates the city with walkability and accessibility. But the rocks, they need to come from they come in first, or else you can't fit anything else in there. And that's your your C trains, your metro, your rapid bus transit, which is such a struggle to get happening in the city, and it's, it's decades that we've been talking about this, and until that gets built and kind of mapped out in the city, we won't really have a skeleton on which we can build the rest of everything else. And I'm real struggling because it's always a conflict of corporate interests versus what do we do for our city, right? So I'm struggling. How do you engage with being mindful of that and attacking that point of it? Because it's never going to change until we really appreciate the fact that there's a conflict of interest there, people versus profit, right? So, sorry, that's a lot, but.
So in short, what can I do? They're sort of writing angry emails to kind of really massage the idea of, hey, you don't have to be a cyclist to use a bicycle. Everybody can be a bicycle user. This is for everybody. Saying trans, you're not one of those people. You're a person in the city that has the right to the city, and therefore the right to move across the city. Right? So.
How can we save space for movement?
That's a really good point, and I don't know how I can say this nicely. I probably can't.
Just say it.
Say it.
I mean,
People need to stop being so
sometimes
selfish.
things need to be said.
People need to stop being so selfish. I can give an example. I just want to address one thing. The shelters, the new rapid transit shelter that you're talking about, those are called leaning benches. Those are for people like me that can't sit down but need to lean back on something. So
I stand corrected.
yeah, they're not the intention that you think or that they may appear to be. They are actually a mobility accessible resting space.
Good to know.
Yeah. So we wanted to change a bus route on the Colburn, to go down Colburn Street, it was just going to make a more convenient route for people to be able to access some certain services. The people on Colburn Street lost their minds. Came to London Transit meetings. You can't run a bus down there. Where will our landscaping people park? Swear.
Well, they park in the bike lane. So
How about your driveway? There's a fire station on that street. You can't park down. You can't have buses run down that street. Thankfully, you had an LTC commission with myself and Jesse Helmer and Dean Shepard and Phil Squire who said, no, we're changing this route and it's going down this way. So you have to have council that's courageous enough to say enough. Right? I realize this may put a shadow on your yard, or this may take 2 feet off of your front lawn. Those things are inconsequential when it means that people cannot move around their city well, equitably, as you said. And we see this every single day, every news report, this person doesn't like that, and this group fought to get rid of this. And at some point, we have to say enough. We cannot just keep building for automobiles. We are at a crisis point in our city right now where people cannot find homes, right? I have people come to my door in my job every single day. I just registered a 76-year-old man for the food bank for the first time. That's ridiculous because he has to choose between housing and food. We should not be focused on cars. We should be focused on making sure that that person, that gentleman who now can no longer afford food, cannot afford a car, has to walk to my food bank to get groceries. How is he going to get there? Is he going to have a safe way to get there? Right? Or, those are the things that have to have importance, not I've lost a foot off of my front lawn or my boulevard isn't big and beautiful anymore. Those things don't matter. And at some point, counselors, and I know I'm not saying all counselors don't agree with this because I know many of them do, but there has to be some realization, and it has to be from the voters too. When you're at the polls and you're listening to their pitches and their campaigns and their platforms, if they don't have a real solution for NIMBYism in the city, we're not going to move anywhere. And they not only have to have that platform and that campaign prepared, they have to be able to convince their colleagues that this is the right thing to do. And that takes a very special and very strong person. And I think we do have some people on council that can do that, but there's a force that just refuses to do it, and it drives me mad.
Thank you for saying what needed to be said. It's all true. It's housing and mobility. It doesn't have to be a house. It has to be a home, and that can be a small studio apartment. It can be a co-op. It can be supportive housing. It can be any number of places, including a single-family home with a pool in the backyard. But it doesn't have to be just that, and it can be apartment buildings and low-rise. I'm a big missing middle housing fan. It's my love language. But again, transportation is not just cars. It's whatever gets you around for any particular task. And those two things are definitely, most definitely, deeply integrated, which I didn't realize. It suddenly had a light bulb moment about 5 years ago when I realized, oh my God, we have built like a post-war North American sort of quote unquote nightmare, Canadian American dream. Like all these suburban sprawl are completely car dependent. Like
Money for transit to go to any of those new subdivisions.
Well, not only no money, but they like don't even want transit. Like there's all this raving about West 5 Sifton. Like it's a cool looking building, but it's not green. That's greenwashing to me. Like you have to walk 38 minutes to catch a bus if you live up there. I'm sorry, that's not a green housing complex. Just my thoughts. Anyways.
So you mentioned the transit housing connection, and I've just been thinking about that. So, for the first time since I've been in London, we have a city council that, because of various pressures and as well as perhaps their own convictions, is starting to approve a lot more density, right? And we have all this infill starting to go up. Including in these north and west end transit villages. But of course, the irony is that the previous council didn't approve rapid transit, so we got transit villages without rapid transit. So I actually see a real opportunity here potentially, right, to introduce into kind of our public conversation this idea that as we have more density, we need to be really quickly moving up the timeline for our rapid transit conversation. There's a process there's the master plan, transit master plan happening. It could all take a very long time, but I think we have an opportunity to start moving forward, and saying, okay, that rapid transit that we didn't build a few years ago, that needs to start happening right now. So that's a comment. I think there really is an opportunity now because there's more density going in to revisit that conversation. A lot of folks on council might not be too excited about revisiting that conversation given how divisive it was last time and given that maybe some of them voted against rapid transit. But I would love to hear from folks about how to best perhaps push that conversation and frame that conversation. Sam, yeah, okay, you might have some good ideas to share with us.
Yeah, so what I was not going to talk tonight. I just wanted to sort of lurk here quietly and listen. But I am pleading with all of you, everybody in this room. You have got to start getting loud with us. Do not wait for the city to say, oh, we're going to have a public participation meeting and we're going to do it in the middle of the day and you can't come anyway. You have got to start getting loud with us. There are people who are willing to listen to you. This what you just said about the lack of that, what that last city council did in terms of killing transit and saying, well, don't worry, we have transit villages, so we can just build all this density and it's fine because we can go up 35 stories instead of 15 because we've got a transit village and there's no transit village and there's no transit. You cannot wait for city council to come to you. There is this sense that I'm getting from the electorate that people have given up on the city because they just, the city puts up these get involved sites and, we have this whole budget process where we've decided where all of our budget money is going before we've even had our first public participation meeting, and there's nothing else to say about it. Get loud. Get loud. And if you know, get the list of all 15 counselors, but don't send it to all 15 of us, because when the counselor gets something and is going to all 15, it's sort of like, oh, I don't have to deal with this, it's going to all 15. What you've got to do is you've got to take a little bit of extra time, and you can do some macros to do this. Send it out to each person, because when I get something that says, you know, Sam, I'm talking to you, it's sort of like, I'm going to pay a lot more attention to that than when I get something addressed to 15 people, although, I mean, I do my best. What I'm trying to say, I'm sorry, I'm pleading with you, get more engaged. Get more engaged with your counselors. And I also think that you can get more engaged with staff. I mean, I don't know if Doug wants to add anything to the discussion today, but I've found that it's relatively easy to file a petition for traffic mitigation, and it will get processed, and it will get taken seriously, and you will get a response. Not always, but you will get a response. But please hold our feet to the fire. Don't wait till the election.
Oh my God, yes.
Like, the website is practically unusable, and I
I'm
wanted
so angry that the staff directory was deleted, straight removed. That was the first thing that made me
down staff emails, and I received them, so that when I need to go try and find a person again, I actually have it, because there's, otherwise that information just disappears.
You and I are on the same webpage. There is, I mean, if you use your Spidey powers, there are like archival versions of the city directory that are still publicly available on the, you know, old Webby machines. But yeah, that when the new website was launched, that, oh my God, I can't put into words the frustration and rage that I felt that now that was completely, and I get it, I'm sure that the staff get insane volumes of email. I'm sure they get the weirdest and the most annoying and possibly the rudest and most aggressive messages. But if you don't know who to reach out to and all you have is this sort of a planning@london.ca or transportation at or whatever, if I have a name, I do exactly what you do. I put it away in a little list, and I hope that they're still there when I need to get in touch with them the next year. But that's an aside. I don't know who had their hand up first. We're all sort of in circular.
In a little cluster here. My question is actually to all three of you, and I'm hearing themes from all three of you that there's a convincing element that needs to happen of like convincing people to take transit, convincing people to drive more appropriately, convincing people to walk more. And I'm curious if anyone has ideas about, or further ideas, more ideas about how to encourage that kind of behavior.
Oh, I have lots. I have a list. The first thing I would say, if you were holding an event in this city, put on the bus routes to get to your venue. It is work for me to try and figure out how to get to your place if I'm taking transit. So if you can put the 2 or the 15 or the 12, whatever it is, that's a super helpful engagement opportunity for you. I've noticed some MPPs are starting to do this. And again, this is what Sam said, not harass people, but consistently be on them to do this, and that does work. But the best thing to do is just invite people with you, right? I'm going to the Knights game, I'm taking the bus so I don't have to park, I can have a couple beers at the game, want to come with me, right? Especially if it's your neighbor, you can take the same bus. And meetup groups. So I met a lot of folks in this room just through simple meetups. And that really encouraged me to get on my bike and do more things in the city that way. And really just inviting people, making them feel welcome and letting them know, like, if I can do this, you can absolutely do this, right? Here's what I've done. Here's how much money I've saved not having a vehicle. shopping on my bike, I save a ton of money, and not on gas and you know, maintenance and all that kind of stuff, but because I can only carry so much, right? So the ice cream is going to stay in the freezer, and I'm going to get the apples instead. So it's just, you make better choices, I think, when you have a different mobility options than in a car, because you're going to overspend, you're going to overbuy, you're going to overeat. There's drive-throughs for a reason, right? So all those little things make a big difference. And if you can show someone tangible proof, here's why taking the bus is better, here's why biking is better, not for everything, but for a lot of things.
I think media and PR can be a friend in this situation. I know for us, after I kind of really early on, you know, jumped into this world after being framed a radical because I wanted to bike my kid to school, there was a really divisive meeting in council chambers, which again, I was very new and green in this space. I couldn't believe people didn't want a bike lane. I was very, very new. And so yeah, ridiculous now that I think back, but I was like, oh, this is very strange. So I invited the mayor to come and bike with my kid, my 6-year-old at the time, to school, to elementary school. I thought, you know, before we start throwing all this stuff around council, all this rhetoric, maybe just ride with the kid, see what it's like. And so they did, and we had our local CHCH TV in Hamilton show up, and then within the first 30 seconds, they were both almost hit by a driver making a left-hand turn across the bike lane they were on. It was on live TV. It was like, I didn't script it. Like, that's just what happened, and anyone that bikes knows that's what goes on all the time. It was a left against a contraflow bike lane. But that started an idea about, it was called Commuting with Council, so we branded it that, and the idea was to get councillors to bike with their constituents to understand the troubles and the issues that they face. So again, you know, it's hard to measure success and change from those things, but from my perspective and what I'm doing is, again, just more from an awareness perspective for people to see that and to start understanding, yeah, you're right, maybe it's not amazing for kids to bike to school, and then why is that? So media and PR stunts are sometimes a good option too.
And to branch off of like media, PR, communications, I believe that the best way to, in my own experience, to convince people is to demonstrate, to be like a good example of, you know, of taking other forms of transportation. I'm a cyclist, 95% of my trips are by bike, and just to demonstrate that it's possible, it's normal for someone to get on 2 wheels or whatever. It's never going to, people always ask, well, what do you do if you have to transport your sons to hockey practice or whatever, that kind of thing. It's never going to be that, but just to demonstrate that it's possible to live your daily life, you know, with a low cost, energy efficient way of getting around. I've had people tell me, you know, like, oh, I'm thinking about buying a bike now, or what's the best bike paths? I've never taken them before. So I often reach out and say, hey, let's go for a ride sometime. And it's being inclusive is very important to me. So, and it's being a good example.
I think it's me. Hey. Hey, I'm Laura, and I'm a local cycling commuter, and I also love walking and the bus. Thank you, Sandra, for hosting us today and showing us this wonderful film. I had not seen it before. There was a big takeaway for me from here, which was the bit where jaywalking was like the villainization of people trying to get around or to cross a street, like wherever it seemed convenient or reasonable for them to do so. And it left me thinking about, you know, desire paths as well. The whole concept of like cutting through an area of grass where, you know, it would be the shortest path based on where you needed to go. So, you know, in spite of there being like a paved path or sidewalk a few feet away. So I was thinking about how a lot of this stuff is like a reactive fix, and it takes a long time for those solutions to get implemented. And I'm wondering, and I want to ask the panel, is this just the way it is? And sorry, I'm referring to my notes. I took a lot of notes today, as Natalia next to me can see. So this whole idea of like the reactive, is that just the way it is? Does it make sense for us to wait for data or to wait for a grassroots petition for a crosswalk to be brought to a decision-making table? Or is there a more proactive approach that you can think of or that you've seen implemented before?
Don't wait for the petition to come to you, you start the petition.
Yes, that's what I actually was going to say. Don't wait for the death metrics, right? Just, if you think it's an issue, talk to your neighbors, talk to your community, and make it happen. Put it in progress. Because city staff aren't going to be everywhere. They're not going to know everything. And definitely city council is not going to know everything or be everywhere either. They just can't. So if you see an issue or a problem and you think you have a solution, bring it forward. Don't wait. Don't wait for someone to get hurt. Don't wait for someone to get killed. Bring it forward as soon as you can.
Hi, Ben. Testing 1, 2, 3. Hi. So just a quick question. Legitimately, what would the process be for getting anyone who is involved in the city with designing not only active transportation infrastructure, but all city designers of transportation infrastructure to be required to take that bus for, at minimum, 30 days per year, and then also an entirely separate 30 days per year to also be required to at least bike to a work, like as their commute. So like, what would that process look like? That accessibility in mind, but yeah, end of question.
Oh.
So I think there's a misconception that people making these decisions don't use active transportation. I can say at London Transit, our head planner takes transit every day. She's very aware of the transit system. She helps make those decisions, but she also uses transit every day. I know there's city staff that ride their bikes that take the bus too. That being aside, I think it's helpful for anyone making those decisions and those plans to access their city in those ways. But forcing them, I don't think that's probably the solution, Ben, but good luck to you in trying. We did do a really interesting thing, and I'm sorry, I think it was London Cycle Link that held this, and I was a participant, but getting candidates out to ride around the city, and that was awesome. It was very eye-opening for all of the candidates, and I was very fortunate enough to participate with some, and they were shocked at the condition of the roads, at the lack of safety in certain areas, and you know, that's a really good way to spread your message. And I think what Tom did in Hamilton, getting your mayor out, getting your city councilors out on their bikes. I know Councillor Lewis does this sometimes in his ward too. But take the initiative. You don't know until you ask, right? And don't be afraid to ask your city staff, hey, have you been on this street or whatever? Like Daniel Hall bikes all the time. That's his job, is to help create bike lanes. So like I said, I think it's a misconception that our staff aren't aware of the issues, but I don't think a refresher is a bad thing either.
Yeah, our local cycling organization kind of took that commuting with council idea and baked it into a campaign around the election. So they'd go out with everyone that was running for office and took them on, well, the ones that said yes, took them on a ride and kind of highlighted those experiences to let the cycling commuting and broader community know where they stand and kind of get some information that way. So they actually did a pretty good job. I forget the complete uptake, but they were out there doing that in the election cycle.
I would like to add on to this. I would gladly ride bikes with any city staffer so that they could see what I see as well. If they don't regularly ride a bike or whatever, but I would love to take any city staffer around to see like what I see from two wheels, because usually our safe cycling infrastructure is on the sides of bodies of water like the Thames or Pottersburg Creek or whatever. And it's never like integrated with, it's rarely integrated with like main roads that we all need to access. So I just think about all the parallel paths I have to take to get out of harm's way. Yeah.
So this gentleman has one question, and I think Colleen has a question, and then I think we're gonna wrap it up because it's getting a bit long. Nice. Tom has to drive home.
Oh, that's fine. All good.
I'm not gonna swank hotel tonight.
No, no.
In the restroom.
No train service.
I loved.
Yeah, it's just I think more feedback than question. I think there was a topic of how do we discourage the purchase or use of SUVs in favor of smaller cars. I think there was also a discussion in the film. I come from France, and we have obviously much smaller, narrower roads there, and yet there was like a huge increase in SUVs anyway. So decreasing road sizes might not be enough to discourage having SUVs on roads, I think. And just to give an example, some grassroots communities, some initiatives, people, they go out on the street and deflate SUVs tires. I'm not saying that's the good solution. I'm just giving feedback about what happens. And usually they put a sticker as well on the car to give some explanation about why they're doing this. But anyway, I think the root of the problem is more the car industry and maybe the oil industry as well. But I would say maybe something to explore would be more around taxes and adjusting taxes on the sales of heavier vehicles. I would say something like that. Yeah. Don't know if you have other ideas or elements about that.
Yes. You also reach out to your MPs and your MPs because different issues have different jurisdictions. Like, for instance, vehicle registration, like the types of vehicles that are allowed to drive in Canada or allowed to be sold in Canada is a federal issue. The highway issues and road design, like sort of legislation, is federal and provincial. So there's a lot of sort of cross-pollination and different sort of areas of jurisdiction. So don't feel that you're limited to just talking to city staff. I mean, we're just putting more work onto it. I mean, it's really going to be up to us. We have to put in the work because lives are at stake, and this is something we're passionate about. The status quo is going to be big cars, fast streets, et cetera, et cetera. And if we want to change it, that's the work we have to put in. And so that's going to be impetus to reach out to and engage with your councillors, with city staff, but also with your provincial MPPs and the ministers and the portfolios that are responsible for certain areas. Equally with the federal jurisdiction, you have to sort of take some time and figure out, okay, so who's responsible for these types of things? Like, who writes the Highway Act? Who's responsible for letting, huge, oversized SUVs and pickup trucks onto our roads? Like, I mean, obviously the auto industry designs them and markets them, but like they're allowed into the country under a federal jurisdiction. So those are all things that we have to educate ourselves on and sort of partner up with other like-minded people and organizations who are also, there are a lot of groups out there who are fighting about these issues and who are, trying to ensure that we have safe streets. So don't feel like I know, trust me, I know, where there are days you're just like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. You're just so fed up. You're writing yet another email, whatever. But there are a lot of other people out there doing this kind of work. You can find them on podcasts, social media, whatever. Like Tom and I connected over, I don't know, Twitter, I guess, and I'm a big fangirl. There are communities locally. There's communities, provincial. There's agencies and organizations that are fighting for a lot of the same things that we are, including, housing issues and equity. I mean, it's all rolled into the same thing. But try and keep your chin up, even though some days you just don't feel like, I can't do this anymore. So Colleen will be our last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
I guess it's kind of a question and a statement, because I think a lot of the discussion tonight is about how do we say what is going wrong, but I think we need to be YIMBYs. We need to be yes in my neighborhood all the time. And when something is done well by your council, because they do, of course, see a lot of feedback, that is negative, and they have the people who come out every time to say no to the bike lane. We need to say yes and start sharing some of our great experiences once those bike lanes are installed. But I would ask you, what is some more positive instead of negative things that you think we as a society can do to make those changes? One of the things I do, just personally, is when people say they don't want bike lanes, I say, I used to drive and I was a horrible driver. I would wait every single time at a left-hand light when there's probably 15 times I could have gone. You are happy I'm not in front of you today. So that is the thing, is like we have to sell it to why, again, somebody mentioned tonight, like if all those people in bike lanes and buses were in cars, it would cost you more time. Don't you want the person in front of you to maybe feel comfortable sometimes? But I would ask, what other things can you suggest?
I think that's a really great point to highlight the good, because we so often, or at least I so often, get lost in the other side. But doing work with organizations, the one thing we always try to do is reach out and search for the commonalities, which we have so many. We've become so polarized in this space, unfortunately, and so wrongly, that we all know everyone benefits from some of these really human-centric spaces. So a lot of the time, it's our job to find those commonalities, speak in a simple way, and be as relatable as possible, exactly as you said. And that's something that, yeah, I'm really just reiterating what you said, but it's finding those commonalities and extending that olive branch as far as, there's a limit to how far that olive branch goes when we're talking about road safety and road violence, but I think most people are reasonable. Again, I came at this not knowing anything. And I didn't think I was completely unreasonable. I just didn't have that moment yet. Maybe the moment is when you just described to someone that you were a driver, or the moment for, I think, a good common ground, obviously, is kids, and that's something that I've had kids, and that's been my lens in this space, and I found that a pretty good common ground, connecting with people that may not have had their awakening or necessarily thought of supporting active transportation or more human-centric streets. I think we've just done such a good job normalizing a ridiculous imbalance that people just don't see it, and they don't see the benefits. So yeah, I think I'm just reiterating what you're saying. So I'm going to stop talking. Let somebody else.
All right, I think we're kind of coming to the end of our evening. There's obviously endless hours of issues and discussions and granular topics that could come out of this. I'm going to share a little secret with you. This movie is available online, but I just wanted to lure you all in here tonight. So, for all your friends who couldn't make it tonight, I watched it on PBS. I think if you type in quotation marks, as a librarian, I will counsel you that. Street Project, I think it's on one of the PBS stations. I was able to watch the whole thing, no restrictions or charges or anything, so. Okay, so it is, and I think it's on a couple of the streaming services. Anyways, this panel was awesome. Thank you, Cedric. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Sheryl. Thank you again to our sponsors and our community partners who all sort of leapt up and said, sure, that sounds awesome. And I was thinking, well, God, I started reaching out to Jason. Is Jason still here? And I said, hey, here's an idea. And I knew that Jason would be excited about it, because Jason gets excited about a lot of things. And he said, sure, we're on board. Whatever do you need? And then I rolled that into helping to get everybody else on board. And the same with these guys. I mean, I reached out to Tom first, thinking, well, Tom's never going to come all the way down here to London. He's like, oh, sure, I'd love to. It's not far. And Cedric and Sheryl as well. Like, people have been really generous, including all of you. Thank you so much for coming out and for spreading the word and for continuing the work that you do, just enjoying life on your feet and your wheels and with your friends. And I think the more that we show that active transportation is fun and relaxing, and it's just such a good decompression from whatever it is you're dealing with. So get out there, spread the good word, talk to your counselors. Thank you, Councillor Pribble, for coming. And talk to staff, talk to other people in other cycling organizations. There's a lot of organizations here who brought materials. Help yourself to those. I'm going to put out a little shout. I did actually ask each of these guys some suggestions for their favorite social media sort of accounts to follow, because I'm a bit of a junkie, aren't we all? My current favorite, aside from these guys, I mean, many of us are fans of Brent Tadarian's, former city planner, City of Vancouver. He's a guru. He's just out there saying all the right things about housing, transportation, mobility, city building, et cetera, et cetera. Jeff Speck, whom we saw in the movie, he is a really good person online, and his book is awesome. My current favorite is a guy called John, the Happy Urbanist. He is freaking unbelievable. He just has, like Tom, this incredible gift of just saying and sharing and sort of putting out there all these ideas. And I mean, he talks a lot about active transportation, mobility, missing middle housing, suburbia, you name it. He's into all this stuff. But he's so cheerful about it. And he's so, like, he just summarizes things in these amazing little videos. I strongly urge you to check him out. He's on Instagram. I don't think he's on Twitter, but he's really cool and he's really fun. I don't know if Tom met him at the CNU conference. I'm so jealous.
Yeah,
he's just great. I love his videos because he just presents things really succinctly and simply, and it's just like, oh, that makes so much sense. So, thank you. Good night. We're going to do a little selfie at the front here, or someone is going to take our picture. Feel free to take an opportunity with us.